can speak now to former US Congressman, indeed former US presidential candidate, Ron Paul, joins me on the line. Great to speak to you again, Ron. We've got a rough idea, not necessarily specifics coming from Donald Trump at this point, but what do you think of his new plan for Afghanistan?
I don't think there's anything new. The words are a little bit different. He says he's not into nation building, but that was a pretense anyway. How many nations have we really built or improved? We've torn nations apart. But so he changes the words and makes it sound like the world will come apart if we don't continue to be the world's policeman. And we as libertarians believe exactly the opposite. We think that more that we're involved over there, the less likely that we will have peace and the more attacks there will be on our personal liberties here at home. So I think there's going to be perpetual war. Nobody knows exactly who the enemy is, and nobody will know when it is ended. But I think Trump has been maybe a little bit more upfront. His goal isn't to get done in 6 months or a year. It looks like he's planning to be there for the long term. He knows he wants to increase the troop levels, and he will, but we don't know exactly. And we who are on the pro-peace side think that he should do very, very little without the consent of the Congress. And yet it sounds to me like even he wants to give away some of his authority and say, well, the generals are in charge. The generals are in charge. Let them make all the decisions. And, of course, generals are very necessary, very important for national defense. But generals also are trained to kill people. And Trump says that we should be killing more people in Afghanistan. And I think that is a recipe for a disaster. I don't see it coming any way toward the position that we hold as libertarians. And it's going to be very costly. So I think it will finally end, and our empire will end when we run out of money. And that's maybe not in the too distant future.
Has Trump just completely flip-flopped and let down his supporters? He said he was going to get out of Afghanistan. Now what he's doing is he's committing more troops and he's giving the military free rein without a deadline to finish the job.
Yeah, and you would think that he needed those supporters. That was one thing up until now. People were getting upset with him here in this country, certainly the left, the Democrats, and also the Republican establishment had become very annoyed with him. But he had this solid relationship with his base that got him into office, which meant populists and independents and conservatives, and even some libertarians who were hopeful about his language, about having better relations with Russia. But now it looks like he's going to undermine his base, which puts him in a more precarious position. I don't know, and nobody would know for sure exactly what his motivations are, but I wonder seriously whether or not the deep state, the people who really pulled the strings, might have been powerful enough to send him the message, hey, look, if you want to stay in office, you better toe the line. But the whole problem with that is even if he flip-flops and goes along with the neocons, which it looks like he has, he's not going to win them over. The people who support McCain and Graham and Rubio, they're not going to all of a sudden say, oh yeah, it looks like Trump's one of us now, we're going to support him. So I think he loses. I think he loses in a political way. He loses support from some of his base, and he's not going to gain any support from the people who are now saying, oh, it looks like he's waking up and he's accepting the neocon position of perpetual war.
As you said, Donald Trump has said, we're not there to nation build anymore. It's a new approach. We're looking to kill terrorists. Now, my understanding was that the US went into Afghanistan originally just to kill one particular terrorist, Osama bin Laden. They did that, but 16 years later, they're still there. What are the chances of success of achieving this goal of Donald Trump's of killing all the terrorists?
Well, it's zero, because they can't define them. Even he admitted there are 20 different groups. And what is a terrorist? A terrorist is somebody that uses a tactic. So any group can be called a terrorist. You know, we have problems in this country, and we have people committing suicide and killing people, but they're called terrorists. But it's very, very rare when any American is killed from somebody coming from a foreign country. There's a lot of foreign anger directed toward us, but the American people aren't really threatened by this. And yet they have this confusion that we have to send the troops over there and kill more of these terrorists or they're going to come and kill us. But that's the propaganda. But I'm convinced if you talk to enough American citizens, they're not going to say, you know, I lie awake at night because I think somebody from Afghanistan is going to all of a sudden appear in my community and start killing a lot of Americans. It hasn't been happening and is not going to happen. And yet they go along with, you know, supporting this president. But I do believe that the American people traditionally have voted, you know, for the candidate that was more likely to give us peace. You can go back all the way to World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and the work. We elected presidents, and Trump too, that yes, we want to have a different type of foreign policy, one of peace. Obama was the peace candidate too. So the American people come up on the short end of this, and of course that is what the institute that I have for peace and prosperity is designed to do, is try to change the opinion of people or get the opinion of the American people who are pro-peace out in the open. But it's very difficult, whether it's on the internet or whether it's through our TV stations. They're not very open to our viewpoints.
Why do you think Trump has taken so long to come up with this strategy?
I think he's in a dilemma. I understand that McMaster's was told to get a strategy, and he'd bring a strategy to Trump, and Trump's, you know, and Trump admitted about his gut instincts that had to be changed. So he says every time he would bring a strategy to Trump, Trump would say, no, this isn't right, redo it. But McMaster's would come back with another one, and then another one. It was always the same, and then finally Trump capitulates. So I think, you know, Trump has some gut instincts, but so far he hasn't been able to stick to them. So he is seen as a flip-flopper, which I think politically is a bad position to be in, and he'll lose both sides of the argument.
Frequently in the past, I'd say that when the US proposes military action, Europe, particularly my homeland, the UK, have been very quick to jump into line behind them. Maybe not so much anymore. Germany's refused already to fully back this strategy. They can see possible blowback, more migrants heading their way. Do you think they're taking the right approach to step back from this?
Absolutely. We take the wrong approach by being over there and putting pressure on them to put our weaponry there right up on the borders of Russia. I mean, we're just looking for trouble. I've never understood why the Europeans go along with it, other than the fact that we're very rich and very powerful. But the consequence of this mass migration, although we have some problems with that, it's nothing like what Europe is putting up with, and literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, coming from the Middle East, but from the wars that we have literally encouraged and got involved in, whether it's Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq and Libya. People are coming and they're literally invading Europe. A libertarian actually, you know, believes in pretty much, you know, as much free migration and immigration as possible. But there's a time when political conditions get to such a point where it's driven by politics, either by this promise of free stuff and free subsidies and a welfare state, or we find out that they're coming from countries that have been disrupted. And then it becomes an invasion, and that's what Europe is, you know, putting up with right now. So I think it's strange that the Europeans have been quite willing to do what we tell them to do. And but I do think it makes them more vulnerable. You know, why should the Europeans feel safer if we go and like we have, you know, participate in a coup and change the leadership of Ukraine, and then get into the debate between the pro-Russian Ukrainians and the pro-European Ukrainians? That doesn't help the Europeans. I think the old principle of self-determination is a good idea, and that is something that our country has preached, and certainly Woodrow Wilson preached it, but we don't follow it through. Self-determination is a great idea. Smaller government is a better idea. I like to see the breakup of big governments, but when people want to declare their independence from huge government, I think we'd all be better off.
Ron, as always, I greatly appreciate genuinely you taking the time to come on and give us your opinions. They're always interesting. Ron Paul, their former US Congressman and indeed founder of the Ron Paul Institute.